And if you watch in the news, about once a week they come up with a new article and photos on new species they've discovered. This is part of the United Nations Agenda 21 program, which is to identify all species and to do a complete global inventory of humans and animals. And what David Rockefeller has said about Agenda 21 is that in the end we're going to have a chip on every person, and they will only be allowed to take out of the system what they put into it. In other words, if you work 12 hours a day, you're allowed to take 12 hours of something of value out of the system, but nothing more. That is total slavery. That is reducing humanity to being robots. That is eliminating spirituality. It's eliminating free choice. It's eliminating everything that makes us human beings. Do you agree?
Sounds right to me.
And so, what is going on? The J. Craig Venter Institute, which you sent me the article,
right,
has their mission as, quote, to forge new life forms, unquote. And they are also involved in manipulated computer code on DNA. What does this mean? Well, Dr. Helen Wallace from GeneWatch in 2002 said, we are in great danger, and she described this as a massive DNA database by the back door. Do you have any comments, Jeff?
We have to take a break here, and we'll be back. This is a subject that is very difficult for the average person to accept. The article is up at Rense.com. I've forgotten the title of the article, Leuren. What is it?
Oh, just a second. It's called White House Gives Go-Ahead for Elitists to Control DNA.
That's right. Okay, I'm going to pull that
December 20th.
Yeah, I'll pull the article back up.
Yeah.
All right, stand by. We'll be back in just a minute. Okay, back with Leuren Moret. What interests me about this whole thing, Leuren, is and you do this all the time, and many of you listening do as well, you look into the background of the people, the principles, and find out what their roots are. And if you look into Venter's background, I mean, the guy is pretty well known. I mean, if you follow this whole issue of genetic mapping, Craig Venter is right there. He was actually charging people over $700,000 in the early 2000s, somewhere around there, to map their DNA and give them a map. $700,000.
That's right.
Now, what this does sociologically, of course, is it begins to set up a caste system here, which we already have, but this is a different way of doing it. And I don't know where it's all going to go, but it's clearly hurtling forward at a pace that is pretty damn scary if you understand the potential of control here, which is complete.
I think I can explain where this is going to go. The J. Craig Venter Institute is a CIA and military operation.
Well, no surprise there, of course.
And anyone in science with money and status is supported by these vested interests, or they wouldn't get that money. They're giving the answers that the money interests want. And so what he's developing, or that institute is developing under his guidance, is the very software of life. And what they're doing is using computing, medicine, technology, and the police state to converge into basically what is creating a totalitarian scientific oligarchy. And their purpose is to get this information and use it in discriminatory programs where the rich benefit and the poor are impacted negatively, by these programs. And the second part of that agenda is the depopulation initiatives. Now, a really good example about this biopiracy is the Indonesian health minister. Her name is Siti Badila Supari. And in 2007, she wrote a paper with 4 other researchers who worked for her, explaining why they had made the decision to halt the sharing of viral isolates of the avian flu in the Indonesian population. They no longer would share it with the World Health Organization.
I remember that very well.
2007. And they had been cooperating fully and giving samples to the WHO, the Centers for Disease Control,
and then they
Hong
offered,
Kong.
and then they stopped making their sequences available, and then they offered to sell them. I mean, it was a pretty weird turnaround there. But go ahead, please.
Well, there was a huge public outcry, and there were a lot of negative reactions to her from the vested interests and their operatives. But she said, we have halted this sharing of the viral material because of exploitation of biological resources of third world countries, poorer countries. And so there they perceived it was a discriminatory program and it would be used against them, and they were correct.
Right.
And whether it was for depopulation or whatever it was, they knew money was behind it, and she was absolutely right.
Doesn't the U.S. Navy have I guess it's will be a bioweapons lab in Indonesia?
Oh, they probably have them all over the world, but
I mean, there's one that's well known there, I'm pretty sure.
The U.S. is pretty involved in Indonesia. That's why Obama went there on this last trip, this recent trip. But they're also talking about the Venture Institute. They're talking about a synthetic genome, or the ability to replicate entire organisms' hereditary history. So these are not simple programs. These are very sophisticated and very complex programs. Now, I did an interview on February 3rd, 2008, with Dr. Wynne Parker, who has a program called Parker's Pathways. You could probably Google it and find it on the Internet. It was 2 hours, and what I talked about was nanoparticle toxicity. And this includes fluoride, chloramine, chemtrails, depleted uranium, and then also nanoparticle mobility, how very, very mobile nanoparticles are, and a very new discovery that I had found just weeks before that interview. I saw all these press releases coming out, a flurry of them from the UC Berkeley campus, from the Lawrence Berkeley Lab, from the National Science Foundation, from the National Academy of Sciences, and I said, this has to be a huge discovery. And what it was, Jeff, was a laboratory on the UC Berkeley campus had demonstrated with a nanoparticle, they transmitted a well-known song to that nanoparticle, and they had a receiver to capture and replay that song that was transmitted from that nanoparticle.
I remember hearing it. They had it up on YouTube, didn't they?
Right. And it's still, I think, on the laboratory website at UC Berkeley. But I went, oh my God, what in the world is the application of that?
Right.
This is huge, because all those the whole scientific establishment in the U.S. would not be so excited. And so on the air, I was talking about depleted uranium and the tremendous affinity it has for the DNA and mitochondria, because uranium and phosphate structures just have they have a love affair all through the universe. And that means that when people are exposed to uranium particles from these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and Yugoslavia, and by the way, It's over here in 2 weeks in the U.S., and we're inhaling it.
Sure, all the time.
It sticks to our DNA and our mitochondria that provide all the energy for the body. So I think we're taking a break.
We are. You have good ears. They have also monitoring stations set up all around the world to track the spread of depleted uranium. They being, you know who they are. They know what's going on, exactly. And
they know where every atom is.
When this was first discovered by the U.S. military in 1943, American scientists discovered it, the decision was made not to use it for obvious reasons. Somebody made the decision to go ahead and use it against the people in Yugoslavia and then Iraq, knowing full well what would happen. And that's a party I would like to see brought to justice, whoever that was. Back in just a minute. Okay, back with Leuren Moret, talking about very big things that are going on right now as we speak at a very rapid rate. All right, Leuren, go ahead. We have one segment left already. It's fascinating. I
know. So, as I was sitting there describing all of this to Dr. Parker, and I was talking about HAARP, this is all integrated into the HAARP system, I knew that Dr. Parker, when Parker was not his real name, I knew he was a CIA scientist. I knew he'd worked for the U.S. government, for the Department of Defense, for the World Health Organization, and the UN at different times. And I knew that he was a microbiologist who had, he had read proposals, grant proposals, research papers. He knew the whole field because he had to advise the government. And so I just sort of said, Dr. Parker, what is the application of this discovery that nanoparticles are transmitters? And he caught his breath and he said, well, it's to redesign the human genome.
That's all, huh?
That's all.
They're going to create a new species, is what they're talking about here.
It's to create anything they want to.
Right.
It's to repeat anything they want to. It's this totalitarian, insane scientific oligarchy that's run by psychopaths, and they think they can do anything they want to.
Well, so far nobody's around to stop them, unfortunately.
Now, what is transmitting and receiving that's around us? Well, how about cell phones in the megahertz frequency band? These are some abstracts that I'm going to just read the titles of. This is 1996. Single and double-strand DNA breaks in rat brain cells after acute exposure to radio frequency electromagnetic radiation. And they used the cell phone frequencies. Here's another one, 1997. Melatonin and a spin trap compound block radio frequency electromagnetic radiation-induced DNA strand breaks in rat brain cells. Here's another one, 1995. Oh, I've already talked about that. Here's another one, 1998. Structural and functional changes in proteins induced by free radical mediated oxidative stress. This is about free radicals. And protection, you can use chemicals to protect the cells. Okay, so then what I noticed in these citations and abstracts is that in the years after 2000, the focus changed. So here's one from 2004. Extremely low frequency electromagnetic fields as effectors of cellular responses in vitro. Possible immune cell activation. So they can boost immunity, but they can also lower it. This is another one, 1995. Microwaves from GSM mobile telephones affect a certain chromosome, and human lymphocytes, those are blood cells, from hypersensitive and healthy persons.